Blessed Raymond Lull was born in the year 1232, or a little later, in Palma on the island of Majorca. His parents were moderately wealthy. They were from Barcelona and had helped to finance and encourage James I of Aragon to conquer the island from the Saracens in 1229. In exchange, they received land on the island where they moved and also received privileges. Raymond got the basic education he needed to be able to work in the family business and eventually inherit it. And living a somewhat comfortable life, he had a sinful youth. In 1257, when he was about 25 or a little less, he married Blanca, the daughter of another Catalan family that had moved to the island. He had two children with her, but he wasn't ready to settle for just one woman. One day, while he was writing a love song to another woman, when he had a vision of Christ on the cross, who said to him, "Follow me." This wasn't enough to convert him, so the vision was repeated another 4 times on other occasions on which he was working on that same adulterous love song. Finally, his conscience told him that the apparitions could only mean that he should abandon the world at once, and from then on dedicate himself totally to the service of our Lord Jesus Christ. He carefully considered how he could serve Christ and wrote down a threefold plan: personally converting unbelievers to Christ, writing books against the errors of the infidels, and founding monasteries in which the necessary languages would be taught. But he himself did not know the necessary languages. He would have to learn Latin and Arabic and study many subjects: theology, philosophy, and something of the culture of the people he wanted to convert. 3 months passed before he began to act on his plan. Then, on October 4th, he heard the bishop's sermon about St. Francis and found the model that he was looking for. St. Francis was also the son of a merchant. He had divested himself of everything to serve God. Blessed Raymond couldn't go quite that far because he had a wife and children, so he kept what was necessary to support his family and sold the rest. He began preparing for his mission. He made a couple of pilgrimages and became a Franciscan tertiary. He withdrew to a mountain on the island of Majorca, where he spent 9 years in penance, contemplation, and study. About 1274, he came up with a logical method by which he would prove the truth of the faith to unbelievers. Controversy over whether this was rationalism would hinder his cause for beatification for centuries. The mysteries of the faith cannot be proven by human reason because they are beyond reason. So if this is what he was doing, then he was wrong. But if he was trying only to show that they were eminently reasonable without strictly proving them, this is valid and praiseworthy. He believed that the way to convert people was with gentleness and persuasion. You can't simply tell people that their beliefs are nonsense. Prince James II of Majorca called him to Montpellier, which is on the Mediterranean coast and is today in France. Blessed Raymond convinced the prince to sponsor the foundation of a friary on Majorca with space for 13 Franciscan missionaries who would study Oriental languages, especially Arabic, in preparation for the missions. The foundation of this friary was confirmed by Pope John XXI in 1276. Blessed Raymond was in Paris from the end of 1287 to the summer of 1289. He visited the Sorbonne, where he gave lectures on his method for proving the faith, and also in this he heard objections to it, and so he revised it in view of those objections to make it stronger. Back in Montpellier, he met the Minister General of the Franciscans, who gave him letters of recommendation to all the provincial superiors of the Franciscans so that he could freely teach his art of demonstrating the faith to Franciscan missionaries. In 1290, he was in Rome. The Crusaders were losing the lands that they had conquered in the East, the Holy Lands, and the Pope was talking about having a new crusade to free the holy places from Muslim domination again. Blessed Raymond spoke to Pope Nicholas IV, who was a Franciscan, proposing another way of freeing the holy places, Instead of just fighting the Muslims, why not convert them using the method that he had invented? Unfortunately, he didn't succeed in convincing the Pope that this would work. There was one part of his mission he still hadn't worked on, personally preaching to the Muslims instead of just training missionaries. He traveled to Tunisia in September 1293 to do just this. On this trip, he focused on trying to convince Muslim intellectuals of the truth of the faith. If he could reason with them about philosophy, about the truth about the truth about the world and about God, then by converting them, he could convert the people. But he didn't have a great deal of success. He wound up being jailed and thrown out of the city. He returned to Italy in October. After several months in Naples, he went to Rome, where he spent the next 4 years. This was a productive period for him in terms of writing. Whenever he had time, he would write. He wrote over 200 works during his lifetime, writing in his native Catalan, in Latin, and sometimes even in Arabic. In August 1298, he went to Paris again, where he stayed until the following July. Here he wrote a work on mathematics, treatises on the contemplation of God, and a work on the sentences of Peter Lombard, which was the standard textbook for teaching theology. He also wrote a dialogue on the relation between philosophy and theology, in which he supported the condemnation of Averroism made by the bishop in 1277. This was a current of thought that tried to argue that the teaching of Aristotle, as interpreted by the Arab philosopher Averroes, was correct and sufficient for happiness. No faith was needed. He would continue to oppose this error on successive trips to Paris. In 1299, the Mongols invaded Syria and began advancing on the Holy Land. When news of this reached the West, it sounded like Muslim rule might be at an end. And this led Blessed Raymond to begin a missionary journey to the East. In Cyprus, he was disappointed to learn that the Mongols had already withdrawn, but he took the opportunity to preach to Muslims and to non-Catholic Christians. His missionary journey also took him to Rhodes, Egypt, Syria, and Armenia. Returning to Italy, he spent more time writing. In 1306, he made a second trip to Tunisia, trying again to convince the Muslims of the truth of the Catholic faith. He traveled again to Paris in November 1309. Here he lectured again on his art of demonstrating the faith, and this time found official approval for his teaching. In 1310, that is, a few months later, professors from the faculties of medicine and theology signed a letter of approval of his teaching, and King Philip IV met with him and gave him a letter of recommendation. The following year, the chancellor of the university, which the University of Paris was the foremost faculty for theology in Europe, and the chancellor of the university certified that Blessed Raymond's teaching was in accordance with the Catholic faith. The Blessed wrote another 14 works in this period against the errors of Averroes and his followers. The Ecumenical Council of Vienne was held from 1311 to 1312. Blessed Raymond took the opportunity to present a series of requests for the council to consider. It approved the most important of these, the establishment of 5 schools for teaching Hebrew, Arabic, and Aramaic, so that missionaries would know the languages of the people that they were trying to convert. Now over 80, he'd said he made a third and final attempt to evangelize in Tunisia. For a few months, he went about disguised as a local, trying to convince Muslims individually to embrace the Catholic faith. Then one day he threw off his disguise and preached openly in a square, and was stoned in punishment for this. Some merchants from Genoa found him still alive and took his battered body onto their ship. They were taking him home, but he died within sight of Majorca on June 29, 1315. Praised be Jesus and Mary.